Today's lesson is called Climate Change. Even fish and trees are moving to escape the heat. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff.
And I am Roger. Today we're talking about climate change again. It's changing all sorts of things, and it's changing the way we live. And hey, it might bring about our death and destruction eventually, but, we'll try hard to survive despite the obstacles. And we were talking about the fact that land animals and birds have been migrating to new habitats as a result of climate change. But last time we began to talk about something else that is happening. Fish and even trees are on the move as well.
Yeah, we talked about the fish, and basically they're swimming to where the water is to their liking. Okay, tropical fish, they find the tropical water too hot, so they're swimming north, the cooler the water, let's say. Then fish that like, somewhat cold water, they're traveling towards the poles because the water is more to their liking there. This is disrupting a lot of stuff. But again, it's all understandable. I know how fish move. They move their fins. They swim. It's not rocket science. But trees moving? This one's a head scratcher. I am stumped. I can't wait to start reading today's article because we'll be talking about how trees move.
Yeah, we'll do that. So let's get to it. Let's talk about the first paragraph after we listen to it.
It is not just fish and other animals that are feeling the pressure of climate change. Trees, too, are on the move. Since individual trees are rooted in place, it can be hard to imagine them marching off to new habitats. However, a major study conducted in the United States showed that many North American tree species have indeed been migrating in response to changes in temperature and rainfall brought on by climate change.
各位好，第一部分我们看到单字 rainfall 这个字是名词，指降雨量、雨量。例如 Last year, the city got the most rainfall in its history. 去年这个城市的降雨量是史上最多的。再来我们看到片语 bring on 表示导致、造成。举例来说 The long drought brought on a famine. 长期的干旱导致饥荒。另外这个片语还可以表示带来、促成，像是 When the star player scored a second goal, it brought on the loudest cheering of the night. 这位明星球员的2度射门得分，引来当晚最热烈的一阵欢呼。
Okay, everyone, it is not just fish and other animals that are feeling the pressure of climate change. Trees, too, are on the move. There, I said it. The trees are on the move. They've packed their suitcases. They've uprooted themselves. And they are trying to find places where they can, plant themselves in more favorable climes.
Well, since individual trees are rooted in place, it can be hard to imagine them marching off to new habitats. Indeed, it is very difficult for trees to uproot themselves. Here we're saying that the individual trees are rooted in place. You could also say they are rooted to the spot. They just can't move, and that is true. The trees can't move, so we can't really imagine them marching off to new habitats. So this is a phrase here, to march off to some other place, which generally means to just start moving from one place to another. Maybe an army, for example, can march off to fight a battle in another country.
Yeah, and trees don't march. I was joking before. Trees aren't packing their suitcases, uprooting and finding places where they can live in a more temperate climate. Okay, that's just not happening because trees are rooted in place. If a tree moves, it's because a human being has moved that tree. Trees do not move on their own. So yes, for this reason, it is hard to imagine trees moving to new habitats. However, A major study conducted in the United States showed that many North American tree species have indeed been migrating in response to changes in temperature and rainfall brought on by climate change. So maybe what's going on is that trees that can't survive in a certain environment are dying, and new species are taking the place of those older trees that died off. Who knows, but that makes a whole lot more sense than the alternative, trees marching around. Anyways, it says here that a major study was conducted. If you conduct a study, you hold that study. You organize it, you contact people, you get people together, and you actually do that particular study. But you don't do a study. That's not the way that people talk about this in English. You conduct a study.
Or you conduct a survey, or you can conduct research. So, yes, we've got a major study that was conducted in the United States. It was performed in the U.S. by scientists or by some universities. And they've shown that, yes, indeed, lots of trees in North America, lots of species there, have been migrating in response to changes in temperature and rainfall brought on by climate change. So, yes, they've been moving in response to something. So in response to just means as a reaction to something. If you hit me in the leg, of course, I will scream in pain in response to your hitting me. Ouch! That will be my response to your hitting me. So indeed, because there have been higher temperatures and because rainfall has changed, that means the trees are actually moving. As Jeff said here, probably some trees in some areas are just dying, and then the seeds are probably being carried by the wind or by birds to another location where they might grow better.
Yep, and all of this has been brought on by climate change. Climate change is the culprit, is behind this, has a hand in this. And by the way, rainfall talks about the amount of rain that falls in a certain area over a certain time. That's all there is to it. All right, folks, with that, it's time for us to take a short break, but don't go away. We'll be right back after this.
The study, published in 2017, examined 3 decades worth of Forest Service data. The data showed that during that time, 86 different species of trees had shifted their territory by as much as 45 kilometers. Evergreens such as pines and fir trees tended to migrate north toward cooler climes. Meanwhile, oaks, maples, and other deciduous trees were headed in a westerly direction, following shifting rainfall patterns.
第二部分，我们看到单字 shift 这个字是动词，指移动、稍作改变。例如 Please shift your attention to the following page. 请把注意力转移到下一页。或是 The fashion retail industry has shifted to online sales. 时尚零售业已转移线上销售。另外，补充2个相关片语。第一 shift from A to B 表示从 A 改变到 B。举例来说Kevin had no problem with the shift from university life to working full-time. Kevin 从大学生活改变到全职工作，一点问题也没有。第二 shift into high gear. G-E-A-R. Shift into high gear. 表示高速运转，全力进行。像是Production at the company shifted into high gear to meet demand for its popular products. 该公司的生产作业全数运转赶工，以因应其热门产品的需求。再来，我们看到名词 climb 指具有某种气候的地区、气候地带。这个字常用复数形，例如 I prefer to live in warmer climes after retiring. 我退休后想住在气候比较温暖的地区。接着，我们看到单字 westerly， 这个字是形容词，指在西方的、向西的。例如 The westerly part of the country hasn't been developed yet. 该国的西半部尚未开发。或是Our road trip is going in a westerly direction. 我们的公路之旅一路向西前进。
Okay, remember where we left off. We were talking about a major study that was conducted in the USA. The study, published a couple of years ago in 2017, examined 3 decades worth of Forest Service data, or data. You can pronounce it either way. So yes, we've got the U.S. Forest Service, and they've been collecting data for 3 decades, which would be 30 years. So they've looked at this data, and they've come to some conclusions.
Yep, but first, they published that study to share those conclusions with other people. By the way, if you do publish something, you make that available for wide consumption. You might publish a book. That means you go to a book publishing company and they put the pages together and they put the cover on and they print a bunch of copies and then they put it in bookstores so people can buy it, so it can be widely consumed. The same thing can go for newspapers or anything like that, and it can go for studies as well. A scientific journal probably put out or published this paper, and it examined 3 decades worth of Forest Service data. So if you did want to talk about trees and forests, it would make sense to talk about Forest Service data. Now, the data showed that during that time, 86 different species of trees had shifted their territory by as much as, get this, Roger, 45 kilometers.
Ooh, that's quite a big distance. And of course, they'll probably keep moving even farther than that. So here we've got the word shift. That just kind of means to change or to move from one place to another in this particular case. Also, I think I remember when I was studying Taiji Chuan, you stand on one leg and then you shift all of your weight to the other leg when you perform some of the moves.
Anyways, let's talk some more about the type of trees that are moving and where they are moving to. Evergreens, such as pines and fir trees, tended to migrate north toward cooler climes. By the way, an evergreen tree is a tree that stays green. Sometimes trees change colors, or the leaves, I should say. The leaves change color in the fall, and then leaves to fall off the trees, so on and so forth. With evergreen trees, that's not the case. Most evergreen trees don't even have leaves. They've got needles, and they stay green all the time, year round.
And yes, they tend to move closer toward cooler climes. Climb here is just a short term for climate. For example, a lot of people from Minnesota like to go to warmer climes during the winter, during winter break or whatever, so they can get away from the snow and cold. But meanwhile, we've got some oaks and maples and other kinds of deciduous trees. Well, they were headed in a westerly direction following shifting rainfall patterns. So yes, rainfall patterns changed in the United States or in North America, so trees were migrating as a result. These are the deciduous trees, which are trees basically that shed their leaves once a year and then they grow new ones. That's why they change color. And some examples are oak trees and maple trees, and there are other species. In this particular case, they moved in a westerly direction toward the west, toward Nevada or California.
Which is weird, man. They're moving to the west and they're following shifting rainfall patterns. Maybe they are not shifting towards like Nevada or desert areas because there's not a lot of rainfall to be had there. Maybe though someplace in Europe or something like that, there's more rainfall in the western part of that country than in the east because of global warming, and these trees are migrating there, so to speak, for this particular reason. They're just following the shifting rainfall patterns. Okay, folks, with that, it's time for us to go ahead and take another break. But don't worry, when we come back, we'll be wrapping up our article on climate change.
While this movement helps preserve individual tree species, it could soon become an economic issue in countries like the United States, where the forest products industry employs around 1 million people and produces $200 billion in sales each year. Like the animals and plants around us, we are now facing the consequences of climate change. But where will we move to escape the heat?
最后第3部分我们看到名词 issue 指重大的重要的问题议题，像是 This bathroom's lack of hot water is a pretty big issue 这间浴室无热水可用，造成相当大的问题。另外这个字也可以当动词，指发行发表，例如 Tickets were issued for the concert weeks in advance 这场演唱会的门票提前好几个礼拜发送。
Okay, so again, we're talking about tree movements in today's lesson. Remember, the trees aren't moving themselves, but where they're growing is changing. They stop growing in some areas and start growing in other areas. So while this movement helps preserve individual tree species, it could soon become an economic issue in countries like the United States, where the forest products industry employs around 1 million people and produces $200 billion in sales each year. So, yeah, that's great. The trees can move. It's good for them. They can continue to survive. Good for them. They deserve to try to survive. But that will have an economic influence on people who depend on trees for their living. It could become an economic issue in countries like the United States that depend on forestry. So here, issue, that could refer to an individual copy of a magazine. Yeah, you could have issues of, say, local magazines here in your local bookstore. But in this particular case, though, the word issue just refers to an important topic or a problem that something is debated about or it's discussed on TV or on the internet. So yes, it could be an economic issue, maybe some kind of topic for discussion or even a problem.
There you go. $200 billion in sales each year. 1 million people being employed by the forest products industry. This could be catastrophic if this tree migration trend continues. Anyways, like the animals and plants around us, we are now facing the consequences of climate change big time. But where will we move to escape the heat? Which is a good question. If the whole world's getting hotter and it's going to take more and more fossil fuels to cool things down, boy, are we ever in trouble. Like, let's say you live in Arizona, okay? 6 months out of the year, it's nice to live there. The weather is nice. But during the summer months, for 6 months, it's terribly hot. You can't go outside for extended periods of time. You've got air conditioning in your house, then you go to your car, that's air conditioned, and then you go to your office, and that's air conditioned. You've got this closed cooling chain. But all of this, when you're using this energy, it's going to contribute to more and more global warming. So what are we going to do? Are states like Arizona going to empty out completely? We just don't know for sure. What an interesting and scary topic.
Yeah, we need to face those consequences, but yeah, where are we going to go along with the fish and the trees and the birds? Everybody's moving around, but we can't all live at the North Pole because the water will melt and we'll just sink right into the water and drown. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. It's time to listen to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分提到，在美国进行的一项大研究显示，许多北美树种确实正在迁徙，以因应气候变迁造成的温度和降雨量的改变。好，文中是用到 conduct 来表达进行实施。好，那我们来学习它的字首字根。首先看到 DUC 或是 DUCT 这一类的字根，它表示引导、带领或是牵引。那带有这些字根的单字多半含有经过引导而产生某种结果的语义。好，那在 conduct 这个字当中，它的字首 CON 表示一起， DUCT 表示带领。好，那带领所有的人事物，或是把人事物整合在一起，用这样的方式，也许可以联想到 conduct， 它有带领、引导，或是指挥，或是进行实事的语义。我们顺便补充几个有这一类字根的单字。第一个是educate， 好，它的字首 E 是来自 EX 向外，那么 DUC 表示引导带领，而 ATE 是动词字尾。当我们把某人引导向前，从他原本思想框架中引领出来，把他带领出来，应该就可以联想到 educate， 它有教育教养的意思。第二个补充呢是 induce， INDUCE， 它的字首 IN 表示在什么之中， DUCE 表示引导。那从字首字根来看，它就有那种 lead into 或者是 bring in 的那种语义。同学们可以试着想，我们把某事物的影响力引进什么当中，也许就可以联想到 induce， 它有这种诱使、引发或是导致的语义。好，那么第三个补充的是 deduce，DEDUCE， 它的字首 DE 有向下或是完全的意思。DUCE 表示引出。当我们把某事物抽丝剥茧，往下一层一层剥开，逐步分析，探究到底，完全的去分析分解它，这样应该就可以联想到 deduce， 它有演绎推论的意思了。好，课文第二部分的第一句提到说，这一项研究检视了国家森林局30年的数据资料，文中是用3 decades worth of 什么什么来表达持续30年的什么什么。好，那当我们用一段时间的所有格加上 worth of something， 可以表达可维持多少时间的什么。像 a month's worth of water 表示可以维持1个月的水， 15 years worth of experience 表示持续15年的经验等等。另外我们也可以用金钱或是度量衡的数量所有格加上 worth of something 来表达值多少钱或是值多少度量衡的某事物。像$5 million worth of rubies 表示价值500万美元的红宝石， 5 pounds worth of beef 表示重量5磅的牛肉。好，那么以上就是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Conduct. The scientists conducted an experiment to determine how effective the drug was at relieving pain. Rainfall. Many tropical countries are known for having a high annual rainfall. Publish. Tony works for a company that publishes crime and mystery novels for teenagers. Shift. Tina shifted the papers on her desk before choosing the one that was the most urgent. Evergreen. Beth planted a number of evergreens in her backyard so that it would remain leafy even in winter. Issue. Timothy wrote an article on the issue of how some laws affected refugees.
Discussion Starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today, and the question is, aside from the issues mentioned in the article, what other problems could the migration of trees and fish cause?
Well, if trees and fish migrate because of climate change, we should have a pretty good idea of where they are migrating to. Now, should we take advantage of that fact by overfishing those fish, let's say? No, but we should try to gain a better understanding so that fisheries don't collapse, and we should also try to do things in a more sustainable way so that even though these fish migrations, let's say, are a problem, the problem, I should say, can be minimized or will be minimized.
Very good reasoning there, but I think the migration of trees and fish is problematic because if the trees move, then birds will have to build their nests in different areas of the world and of the countries, so that will definitely affect the habits of bird watchers. They'll have to adjust their schedules and their itineraries to figure out where they can go see different birds at different times of the year.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you guys enjoyed reading and learning along with us. I am Jeff.
I am Roger.
See you next time.